Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fiskaspjall. I'm your host Alessandra and I can't believe we're already nearing the end of season 1, you guys. Luckily, this final episode is another two-parter and for a good reason. I'm joined by a very special guest. Skúli Skúlason is one of the most influential evolutionary ecologists in Iceland. His work has shaped fish research in the country, and his studies on how different forms of fish, like the Arctic charmorphs in Lake Thingvallavatn, evolved through different ways of using resources, have gained global recognition and made a lasting impact on the field. Today, Skúli splits his time between the Icelandic Museum of Natural History and his professorship at Hólar University. In this first part, he shares how he first became fascinated by Arctic char, how his studies abroad shaped his research, and how Icelandic fish research has changed over the past few decades. And now, without further ado, I'm so excited to welcome Skúli Skúlason to Fiskaspjall. Everywhere we go, there is something to see. So dive into the blue to discover the world of fish. Fiskaspjall, where we talk about all things fishy.
I was so excited when your name was floated as one of the guests in the podcast because I remember meeting you for the first time and you were this very sweet man that I had no clue who it was, but you were very welcoming and very open and always happy to explain things and to give me a bit of the backstory. And that was such a nice thing coming to Iceland for the very first time, starting a PhD in a system, in a place that I had no clue about. Mm-hmm. And I remember we started with this very big stickleback meeting for this massive project that we just started, and I felt so lost. And I remember you giving the whole thing a bit of a frame. Mm-hmm. And your 2019 publication about Eco Evo Divo was also one of the first publications that I read. Mm-hmm. Because Bjarni was like, read this. And I'm like, okay. And it was kind of like my first introduction into what did become my PhD. So it's almost like a nice little coming back to the beginnings for me. So I'm very excited.
Well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate this.
So maybe we can start with you introducing yourself, like where you're from.
Yeah, I grew up in Akureyri in the north of Iceland, and also was spending a lot of time in the countryside, which actually is one of the reasons why I was so interested in nature and biology. And then when I was like 19, 20, I went to Reykjavik to study biology at the University of Iceland. So after that, I didn't move back to Akureyri really after that. So I went to Canada, the University of Guelph, for my graduate work after my bachelor's here, but I did some research in between. We may come back to that later. And then I got this opportunity to accept a very strange invitation, in fact, as it was, to return to Iceland to work at what was then Hólar Agricultural College in 1990, so quite a while ago. And I accepted this almost as a blind date. It was a small agricultural college, but with enormously good facilities to do all sorts of crazy experiments for a recently graduated fanatic in fish research.
And what was the position that you were invited to for?
It was this department, like this college had been recently specialized into aspects of aquatic biology, especially aquaculture, and equine science, horse studies, and then a few years later we also started tourism studies. So my role was really to build up the aquaculture and fish biology department. So I became the head of the department, but I also became sort of leading the research development of the college in general. And maybe a kind of a funny reason why that happened is that, and my hiring was related to that, there had kind of been a crash in the industry of aquaculture in Iceland in those days, something that happens regularly. And there were very few students. So the opportunity was there to start research, and we developed breeding program for Arctic char. That was then becoming aquaculture fish in Iceland.
Sorry, the crash was in the students, not in the fish?
Well, the crash was, first of all, the crash was in the economic situation of the industry. And that meant that much fewer students were coming. And so the idea of the school was to diversify, start more looking into ecology of fish and aquatic biology. And this is what I was hired for, and I kind of it was a complete blind date, but it was an enormous opportunity for me personally and, to build something.
So you already call yourself a fanatic, and how you got inspired by nature, did you always know you wanted to work in biology, or was that just a hobby to start out with, just living in nature?
Yeah, I think that we can probably say it's both. I very early on got very fascinated with geology. Like I remember even 11, 12 years old collecting rocks and doing those things, and but I always enjoyed fishing and just being out in nature, and I was constantly asking questions and just enjoying myself very much. I think that was sort of what children's experience was very strong in this. And but then later on, I kind of sounds maybe controversial, is that when I went to menntaskóli, gymnasium, I actually went for like a physics major or strength in the studies. So I didn't learn much biology. And sometimes I say the reason why I went to study biology was because I was so curious about what it was about.
Because you didn't get it before.
Yeah, because I was just missing that part. And but also in those days, we're talking about like 74, 5. There were big environmental issues being raised globally and in Iceland. Sounds familiar. And also I was taking some courses at this gymnasium in Akureyri, Menntaskólinn á Akureyri. That was, for example, in psychology. I was a very, very motivating teacher there. So I started reading about brain and how personalities developed in humans, you see. And so ecology and this kind of idea about development and physiology was, I think, what drove me into the biology part.
So that then really inspired you to move on to biology at university, or was there like one teacher or a specific subject that really pulled you in?
I think that at that time it was really the ecological aspect and, just learning more about the biology of Iceland also, of course. Living on an island,
And
get fascinated with what's around you.
Yeah, and we have so much nature around us. How was studying? You went to Hawaii back then?
Yes, I started I did 3-year bachelor there and graduated in 81.
How many, was there many people there, or was it quite small and familiar?
It was very, very tight and extremely good memories from those days, made many friends. So the department was quite separate because there was not really a very coherent campus at the University of Iceland then. We were kind of a little bit aside in the city, and it became a very close group of I guess we have been around 15 to 20 in each year. So it was a group of about 50 to 60 students taking that 3-year program.
Oh wow, that is cozy.
And then to maybe fill in what happened after that a little bit was that there was no master's degree offered really in any kind of natural science at the University of Iceland in those days, and no PhDs. So it was almost obligatory to go abroad. But they offered like a 4th-year project, what's it called, 4th-year project. That often became very big because of the lack of research projects or research studies. So I got introduced to this 4th-year project to study the Arctic char in Þingvallavatn. And that's how my kind of orientation to my research really started.
Yeah, so my next question was what was your first fish project? And that, I guess, was your 4th-year project. What was it about? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was, of course. It was changed everything in my life, basically, And At that time, I after graduating, and we had been very fortunate to get a very, very diverse group of teachers and professors there. Young people that were coming back from various programs in England and America, even Germany. There was a very diverse group of professors, and they came in, and in the third year in particular, we were really exposed to new ideas, and I have to mention the person that really got me hooked on this fish study was Skúli Skúlason. Was recently coming home. He hadn't even finished his PhD at this time, but he did it 1 year later. And he involved me and another colleague, Hilmar Malmqvist, to work with him on basically examining and confirming the existence of different morphs or varieties of Arctic char in Þingvallavatn, something which had been recognized before in earlier research, like even back to the 19th century research. And the reason why he did this is that he was studying the benthic sort of invertebrate, especially the permanent snail on the bottom of the lake. So he was fascinated about the ecological relationship of the fish and in the lake. And that Þingvallavatn at that time was basically being a subject of a big research program. It had to do with 1100th anniversary of Icelandic settlement. So a professor in Copenhagen, Pétur M. Jónasson, Icelandic guy by origin, he was leading this big project, and so there was a space for us in that project. And so that was, so my role in that work, and I did it, actually this lasted for 3 years, was to categorize or really look at these different varieties, because they certainly existed there, in terms of morphology, growth, maturation patterns, sort of life history. And that became my 4th year project thesis.
That lasted for 3 years.
Yeah, it was like 250 pages. It is actually close to being my largest thesis.
And then you realize you've kind of gone as far as you could in Iceland. So you were still passionate about it and you wanted to learn more, and that's why you decided to go abroad? Or was there no discussion about it? You were like, obviously that's the next step.
I think it was kind of obviously the next step, and for me, and I was always planning on doing that. And then I have found my subject, so to speak. And so what was so fascinating about this experience is that you see, diversity in fish in general at that time was maybe being, and maybe I'm simplifying things a little bit, they were very taxonomic or systematic, so these different varieties, they were being looked at really as sort of problems. Sometimes people said it was like a char problem. It couldn't be identified, properly. But we, for example, through working with these good people like Sigurður and several other people, that got us really going on thinking about this more in terms of evolution and in terms of speciation and things like that. And in fact, that was the luck, was that this was a growing trend in this particular field, in worldwide, you say, I think, for fish, especially freshwater fish. And not to make the story too complicated, but I actually planned originally to go to France to study, and I had been giving a French scholarship even, and then I would have ended up studying physiology, but fate was different, so I met somebody that recommended, a Canadian person that was in a small meeting that we had about the lake, that recommended me to look at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, which was a kind of an iconic department there for studies of salmonid fishes. And, Canada, like Ontario, has 500,000 lakes. And they have not much Arctic char, but they have lake char and brook char, those species. And so so that university became my home for 7 years, where I did a master's degree, finished in 86, and then I finished my PhD there in 1990. Yeah, that's how it goes.
And that collaboration is still going strong.
Yeah, I mean, the experience, I mean, I learned, I mean, you mentioned that I had been, and I'm very, happy to hear you say that I was a welcoming outcome, and I remember that conversation, is that I received similar. I met people that were receptive, and they were enthusiastic. And they were not only enthusiastic about the science and biology, they were enthusiastic about the people they worked with. And realizing that what we were doing in the research was a cultural, we were having a relationship, So I had an extremely good supervisor there, David Noakes, that led me through this in a very creative way. So yes, that's how it happened.
That sounds, amazing to get this opportunity to just go and experience this. Nowadays, we do have a master's program. We have a PhD at Howie. So we get a lot of international students coming in. But I must say, I notice also that Icelandic people are very much also encouraged to leave during their master's and their PhD, and then they come back. Mm-hmm. So how do you think that might be influenced by this initial lack? Like, do people still go like, this was actually one of the best things, you should too? Mm-hmm. Or is it more to make space for other people to come in? Is it a combination? Is it kind of like a win-win? We get people from abroad, but we also get to, by people returning back, to get all that knowledge back in?
Yeah, I think that I think you're right about that. That it's a mixture of these things. But in the old days there, when I was, or everybody had to go abroad because there was no graduate program here. It was really, there was a resistance even to building a graduate program because it was thought it would be inbreeding in this small society, you see. So we would be making our own kind of just replicates and things like that. And that was but then it all changed because the other side of this was the need for the university and the university community in Iceland to have a research program, have research programs, have masters and PhDs. And it made a huge change. And I'm very happy that you identify that there is a motivation for example, for Icelandic students that go into a program here to spend time abroad. And also this vast community of international students, graduate students that has come to Iceland, after all this happened. I think that's fascinating and very, very, very important.
So what do you feel are the biggest changes that you've noticed, besides the fact that we do now have a graduate program? Like, maybe there's big technological changes, or what do you feel was like one of the things where maybe in the moment, or just like looking back when you're like, wow, when I was, I don't know, in my bachelor's, we did not have this, now we have it and it's amazing. Mm-hmm. Or maybe not so great. It can go either way, right?
Yeah, I think that maybe the first thing you think about, and especially, like if I sort of just summarize the kind of research that I did, it's about diversity. It's about understanding relationships and origins. And that's why this massive advance in genetic technology, mentioning technology, is of course a huge factor. Great, and the ability to sort of look more deeply into the small things. So, and I haven't mentioned it yet, that my kind of core interest in all of this was and still is the developmental part. It's really how the organism becomes what it is like from a zygote to the, and I just remember using methodologies with studying embryos of fish, and measuring fish also. Now I'm talking about the advance of computers and microscopes and the digital, which we didn't have in those days, you see. And
I remember.
Yeah. So it's endless in that sense. But I think we also should be mentioning here the more of kind of a conceptual and theoretical aspects. So especially when it comes to fish, because in general, the notion, the world of fish that I came into, at least in Iceland, was very much management oriented. It was very much about fishing, and it's very understandably. But then, after you started working with the animal, and understanding how extremely interesting it is from an ecological, evolutionary, and developmental point of view.
Until the early 2000s, scientists believed that fish can't even feel pain. This notion was based on the fact that fish lack the neural structures which allow mammals and birds to feel pain. But the absence of evidence doesn't mean something doesn't exist. And of course, the idea that fish cannot feel pain had real-life consequences when you think about what we're allowed to do to fish during research, farming, or fishing. And in fact, many countries have updated their animal welfare acts to also include fish.
Realizing this, how this vertebrate is a great subject to study evolution, for example, and understand how species are formed, and all these things.
Do you think that there's been such crazy cultural changes, I think, between the 70s and now? It is 50 years, so we had some time. Do you think these changes have also affected how we conduct research, the questions we ask, and how we view fish?
That's a good question.
You've mentioned, for example, that we went from species and now we look more at individual variation. Do you think that might have been also influenced by the culture, that we are more focusing on individual variation in people?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. That the notion of diversity, the recognition of the value of diversity in general. Now, biodiversity obviously is an example of that, but cultural diversity is basically, to me, cultural diversity in human societies is a part of biodiversity. We are part of nature, you see, and that definitely has evolved. Yes, I would, for various reasons, and not the least because of the internationalism and sort of the global development, and to connect with that and get back to Guelph and all that experience, we developed a collaborative program with 4 universities or institutions in Iceland and Guelph University, and there were quite a number of students that went back and forth and did their degrees here. Numerous people went on sabbaticals in each of these places, and so I think, just to relate to this personally, you see, your question is that's how I realized the significance of appreciating difference and diversity of how we live and work, you see.
Yeah, because just connecting back to this seminal paper for me, this big collaborative paper about the Eco Evo Devo, one of these days I'll get it right, is very much to combine things that usually were very isolated. Is that something that just naturally came about because you have the experience in so many different fields, and you gave yourself also the chance to be curious and get these different aspects, and then through your life you realized, hey, actually now I'm ready to pull all of this together? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, thank you for that question, because it helps me also to understand myself to answer a question like that. But I would say that starting backwards is that for this, in relation to this particular publication, it was built on a effort that I initiated through when I was on sabbatical in Scotland in 2013, just after I stepped down as the rector of the college and of the Hólar University, and I got a grant there, and I pulled together what I consider to be sort of key important laboratories or professors and researchers from Canada and Europe, basically, mostly, and America. So we had a workshop on the concept of combining ecological aspects of diversity, developmental aspects, and evolutionary aspects, also through importance of management and conservation, in particular, the conservation of diversity. So that's where the Evo Devo concept really came about. But at that time, there was also maybe an international trend in the sciences of evolution and conservation biology to integrate and think of the organism as a part of the environment it's in, and really start to understand all the integrated dynamics, you see. But that's sort of, I said I would answer it backwards. So starting with the end. But the beginning, I think, for me to appreciate the significance of combining things and sort of cut across fields, was that I was very privileged with that I got to do a short postdoc in Berkeley, in California, University of California, with an extremely good man called David Wake. And he was a developmental evolutionary biologist, and he was kind of a pioneer in that field, really. And this time there, and I know this sounds very mystical when I say it, it changed me. Like I came from Guelph with after my PhD, like I said before, completely fanatic about this. I was so fascinated by this, how I was raising the char progeny there, seeing how different they were, you see, when they grew up in a controlled environment. And I looked at how their bones were developing and how their behavior was developing. I saw big differences. But then I started, after I came to Berkeley, there with working with the people there, to really put this into the context of the evolutionary process. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So I started realizing that you saw sometimes maybe char or other types of fish, stickleback or cichlids in Africa or whatever, across different lakes being at sort of different stages of divergence. And that really got me going to create like this sort of model of divergence, where you could use space for time, where you could visit different lakes. And we started doing that in Iceland later, after I came home, to basically see what ecological and developmental sort of forces were operating to create this situation in that lake and another situation in that lake. But clearly they seem to be on a common path or a common continuum of divergence, you see. So I think that's what this moment when I realized this was an aha moment. And
that must have felt really good.
Yeah, and I remember giving a presentation there in Berkeley about this in a seminar. And it was like a life-changing experience because of the responses I was getting. So the self-confidence built up, you see.
So the response was really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And somebody came and sort of pat me on the shoulder. Very thought-provoking presentation, Skúli. And this is what we need. You see, this is what the social aspect of science is all about. We need to look at this as a friendship relationship, you see, and support each other and encourage each other.
That's definitely what I have been experiencing from you. So I think you're doing really well.
Next week, Skúli and I get into how he and a colleague keyed a new term in ecology while out on a walk and what he has been working on more recently. But don't hop on to the next thing yet, as I have another fishy fact in store for you at the very end of this episode. Thank you all so much for listening today. Big shout out to my colleagues at Icefish Research, Like, Teresa, Michelle and Guðbjörg. Thanks to Asip for handling all the paperwork, and thanks to Háskóli Íslands for awarding us their science outreach grant that makes this podcast possible. Thanks to Sandra Rybicki for designing our beautiful logo, and special thanks to Kaure for trusting me with his incredibly cool recording equipment that allows me to go and record people everywhere. And our title song was written and recorded by me, your host, Alessandra. If you also want to support us, you can subscribe to our podcast on Patreon. There you also get to submit questions and suggestions for future episodes, because yes, there will be a second season. You can also leave us a review, and please tell all of your friends and family about this podcast. It really helps us grow. Follow us at Icefish Research on Facebook, Instagram and Blue Sky, and visit our website at icefishresearch.com. Have you ever seen a video of an octopus punching a fish? If not, go check it out. Or maybe those videos have already found you and you're wondering why that poor fish got sucker punched by an octopus. Researchers aren't entirely sure why this happens either, but National Geographic explorer Eduardo Sampaio has a hypothesis. Based on his research, he thinks that teams of up to 10 fish and usually 1 octopus hunt together cooperatively, with the octopus keeping everyone focused. And if a fish isn't pulling its weight, it might get a quick reminder in the form of a punch. And with that, see you next week for our very last episode of Season 1 of Fiskaspjall.